With high expectations, human beings leave Earth to begin a new life in space colonies. However, the United Earth-Sphere Alliance gains great military powers, and soon seizes control of one colony after another in the name of justice and peace. The year is after Colony 195. In a move to counter the Alliance's tyranny, rebel citizens of certain colonies scheme to bring new arsenals to the Earth, disguising them as shooting stars. However, the Alliance catches wind of this operation. Though the One-Year War is the most important conflict in regards to Mobile Suit Gundam's Universal Century, the argument could be made that Gundam Wing is one of the most important Gundam series ever due to its major success in the Western market, truly taking the franchise worldwide. However, we find ourselves beginning to delve into the events of another war. In these following episodes of Gundam Explained, we head to the After Colony timeline to discuss what exactly began a guerrilla war between 5 Gundams piloted by 5 teenage soldiers as they sought to bring down the tyranny of an entire planet. Now, one thing I should mention is that we are dealing with 2 timelines here. The first is called the Wing timeline, and the other is Endless Waltz. These videos will be following the normal Wing timeline. Thing is, both are very similar to one another, and I will try to mention deviations between the two when they come up, because there's really only some minor differences, outside of mobile suit designs, which I will also discuss. Now, if you're wondering if I'll be covering the movie Endless Waltz, the answer is yes, because it's the end of the Gundam Wing story. Stop looking at me, Frozen Teardrop. Stop it! Another element worth mentioning here is that while we're still going to get the chance to do a lot of discussion about cool robot technology and things like that, the After Colony timeline doesn't really have as much of an explanation on how a lot of its technology works. Rather, the After Colony timeline is a bit more character and philosophy driven. So during points of the story, I'll likely be finding myself talking a bit about a character's philosophy, or why they believe the things they do, so on and so forth. So, let's get started. Part 1. Operation Meteor. In the year after Colony 165, the space colonies that humanity had emigrated to elected a chief representative for themselves named Hiro Yui. This man was a pacifist, and consistently was preaching non-violent solutions and complete disarmament for all world nations. He had a wide support base due to his beliefs, including fellow pacifists and monarchs of the Sank Kingdom, the Peacecrafts. During After Colony 174, 9 years later, Yui began touring each of the colonies as part of a goodwill effort, and began preparations for a colonial independence movement. In After Colony 175, Hiro Yui would be flanked by his aides Dakim Barton, Kans Karante, at a speech. A lone assassin sits atop a roof some distance away, and fires a single gunshot that changes the future. That assassin's name is Odin Lowe, who is commissioned to pull this off by General Septim of the Alliance Forces, head of the Alliance Space Forces, specifically. Seemingly simultaneously, Yui's allies on Earth in the Peacecraft monarchy saw their home of the Sank Kingdom taken over and burned by the Alliance, with King Peacecraft sending his 2 children into hiding. In After Colony 180, a young boy is born to the Winter family. Due to reproductive issues that many people who have only lived in space have had, the child's mother dies shortly after giving birth. Up to this point, the family had only had children through artificial means, but the boy's mother wanted to have one natural birth with the boy's father. After this, in the late 180s of the After Colony timeline, uprisings and rebellions within the colonies were frequent. Kans and Dakim would go on to lead the Colonial Revolutionary Army, which would use stolen mobile suits to attempt to fight back against Oz. Around this time, there were 5 boys that were being recruited for a very specific purpose. The first of them was named Duo. Duo was an orphan and a thief that was taken in by a church at Colony V-08744. Raised for a time by a Father Maxwell and a nun named Sister Helen, Duo, for the first time in his life, was starting to get structure. Unfortunately for him, that began to change when a colonial rebel group took over the church he was in. Due to the pastor preaching peace and quoting Hiro Yui, the rebels responded with the back of their hands to both the pastor and the nun. This is in spite of the fact that the sister was medically treating their wounded. To stop them from killing them, Duo volunteers to steal a mobile suit and takes off. Though the young tyke manages to pull it off, by the time he returns to the church, he finds it attacked, with the Alliance military brutally putting down any resistance. 245 people in total were killed, and the act was then called the Maxwell Church Tragedy. Duo was the only survivor. He would go on to take the surname Maxwell and declare himself the God of Death. On Colony X-18999, CANS has begun an assault on the Alliance forces with stolen Alliance mobile suits called Tregos. The OZ-07MS Trego was a versatile mobile suit that stood 13.8 meters tall and was a multi-form suit. Though it was originally designed as a bipedal suit, it could actually fold its legs into itself and be equipped with a hover unit. This would be the most common usage of the suit, essentially functioning as a combination of a hover tank and a traditional mobile suit. Its normal weaponry would be 2 long-range cannons mounted on its shoulders, similar to the gun cannon and gun tank of the Universal Century, and a beam rifle as well. It's in this battle that Kansas forces, unfortunately for them, run straight into a big problem. The commander who made his name fighting back with his squad, known as the Specials, was Treize Kushrenada, who had a young woman named Lucrezia Noyne as their intelligence officer. Treize's squad rolled out in a mobile suit known as the Leo to counterattack. Now, the OZ-06MS Leo is a mass-produced mobile suit developed as a mass-production version of a mobile suit that was deemed way too much for a normal pilot to handle. More on that later. The Leo, on the other hand, was meant for just about anyone daring enough to be a pilot and get in and use it. It's a well-rounded grunt suit that can be used in and out of gravity with just a switch of some equipment. In fact, the Leo's versatility is difficult to match when it comes to grunt suits in Gundam lore. The most standard equipment that the suit used was a shield mounted on its left shoulder, a 105mm assault rifle with a 100-round cylindrical magazine, and a beam saber. However, it could use just about any beam weaponry that the Earth Alliance developed. It could use the Tregos' beam rifle, long and short barrel beam rifles, the shorter of which had a higher fire rate, the longer one hits harder, both of which could be reloaded with energy packs. It could also use a bazooka, a Dober gun, a long-range shell-based weapon that packed a wallop, a mega beam cannon, though this is rare for the Leo, but we do see it at the opening of the first episode of the show, and even shoulder-mounted beam cannons in some circumstances. The versatility came in handy in this particular case because Treize's squad was making short work of the stolen Tregos. Granted, I imagine what came more in handy was the fact that Treize's men were actually, soldiers. It's during the skirmish that Odin Lowe attempts to assassinate General Septim, but fails in his attempt as another soldier takes the bullet for him. Kans pulls his men back after being told to do so after a call from Dakin Barton. However, there is a contingency plan. Odin Lowe Jr. is actually on the field with something of his own and is pointed right at Alliance headquarters.
Rocket launcher!
It's at this point that Treize Kushrenada moves his Leo in front of the shot, taking the proverbial bullet for Septim. Even though Odin Lowe Sr. was able to escape, he's killed by Dakin Barton. He's found by his son, whom, as he died, he gave the advice that it's okay to act on one's emotions. Odin's son would then detonate the explosives in the base, causing a fire that Septim put out using the colony's weather systems. After the injury he received from the rocket launcher, Treize wakes up in the hospital and...
Hello, nurse!
Yep, this is Leia Barton. Believe it or not, she's important on top of being a pretty lady. Normally, this is the point where I'd make a mean nurse joke, but my last 3 or 4 girlfriends have been nurses, so I'd rather not give them more reasons to show up at my apartment with a gun and shoot me. Anyway, and after Colony 190, a young man named No Name, no, I'm dead serious, that's what they call him, who was separated from his family as a bouncing baby boy, and no, I mean he literally got bounced out of a horse-drawn carriage as a newborn, has been working as a mercenary in what could be somewhere in the South Pacific. The manga doesn't specify. Granted, it has palm trees, so it could be Florida for all I know. During a battle, the mercenary group was sold out before a battle with the Alliance. The perpetrator was a young girl named Mitty that No Name had saved before. After she confesses her love to No Name, he shoots the transmitter around her neck and moves on with his life, heading for space. Around the same time, Odin Lowe Jr. was spotted by Relina Dorlin, the daughter of the Dorlin family. The young Odin Lowe was in the process of doing reconnaissance for an anti-Earth terrorist organization. The men sent in to take care of the rebels were the Specials. Specifically, they sent in Treize Kushrenada and a young man with platinum blonde hair and sunglasses named Zex Marquise. The two end up sortying in a new mobile suit called the Ares. The OZ-07AMS Ares is primarily an aerial mobile suit developed by the Earth Alliance. Though the Leo did have a flight pack it could wear, it wasn't nearly as mobile as these suits could be. These were specifically built for flight. In their flight mode, an Ares will fold its legs into the thighs and would let its thrusters do the talking. It was commonly equipped with a machine gun known as a chain rifle, which could be mounted on the wings, or a 4-tube missile pod that could also be mounted on the wings or carried in the hand manipulator. Regardless, during this counterattack from the specials, we see that Zex works pretty quick. Treize even remarks that the young man is fast as lightning. One of the terrorists escapes and flees to the Dorlin estate, taking Relina as a hostage. Zex lands there, gets out of his mobile suit, and the terrorist basically says your choices are A, you give him the mobile suit and he leaves, or B, the girl dies. Zex, being the trendsetter that he is, chooses C and shoots the fucking guy. He then lets him go so he doesn't traumatize the girl anymore. At this point, Zex takes note that the girl is safe and leaves. Granted, he also notes that she's his sister. Yeah, the Peacecraft children I mentioned, well, the Dorlin family were friends of the Peacecrafts, so they took in Relina and raised her as their own. As for Zex, he chose a silly name and decided to join the Alliance military for reasons I'll talk about later. Though I don't know why he picked such a weird name. I mean, who names their kid Zex? Why would he change it from Miliardo? Wait, who the fuck names their kid Miliardo? Anyway, Relina herself is more worried about the mysterious kid who showed up at her school, because now he's gone after the attack. After Colony 193, Catra Rababa Winner, the heir to the Winner family fortune, is kidnapped by the anti-alliance group known as the Magwanok Corps. And he doesn't really give a shit, to be honest. He doesn't have a very high opinion of himself. He's taken to Resource Satellite MO3, and oddly enough, Catra's dad feels for the plight of the Magwanoks. He's just not happy that Catra's going to go with them to Earth. Their leader, Rashid, slaps the poor self-esteem out of Catra's mouth when he talks back to his dad. After a chat with a very peculiar mustachioed scientist, it's found out that one of the Magwanok Corps members ratted them out to the Alliance. After Catra finds the imposter among us, he takes a bullet for Rashid when the traitor breaks free of his restraints. That's not a bad hit, and Catra volunteers to take the traitor's place in a mobile suit. He then sorties into an MS for the first time of his life. The suit he uses, the WMS-03 Magwanok, was developed by the countries in the Middle East as a hard counter to the Oz's mobile suits. Now the kicker is that these suits are specifically designed to be very good on their home turf of the desert, on top of other terrestrial combat and space combat. These suits, oddly enough, are actually a notch above the Leo in their overall performance as well. They have a pretty solid armament on top of it. It's a beam weapon capable suit and had both a beam rifle and a beam saber on top of a shield. However, it could also use a heat tomahawk, much like the Heat Hawk of Xeon mobile suits in the Universal Century. Obviously this is a good melee weapon, but it could be thrown as well. During the battle, it's found that Catra is both a natural leader and a natural mobile suit pilot. The Corps managed to get all their vehicles clear, but asked Catra to withdraw and meet up with them again at a different time. So, Catra does as they ask, and in recognition of his bravery, the Magwanok Corps swear their loyalty to him, dubbing him Master Catra. After Colony 194. On the L5 colony A-0206, the heirs of the Dragon clan are apparently required to marry at the age of 14. Don't believe me? Hey, look, it says it right there in the manga, dude. Regardless, Meirin Shirin, who nicknamed herself Nataku, was engaged to marry a brash young boy named Chang Wu-fei, who beat on her. Why?
'Cause she's a woman.
Though the married couple constantly bicker over the philosophy of justice and apparently beat each other up, it's basically irrelevant. In the hangars of this colony, we see a couple of mobile suits are being assembled, though we're not going to talk about them just yet. And this is also where one of the Endless Waltz differences come in, because, well, the one in front that kind of looks like it takes some inspirations from a Greek soldier, it doesn't look like that in Endless Waltz, and I kind of prefer the fact that in Endless Waltz it looks more like a Leo with extra jetpacks. We'll get to that later, but that's the basic difference here. The elements of the story are almost exactly the same. Elsewhere in space, Alliance Major Sally Poe was assigned to watch over this colony. Thing is, General Septim got his problem-solving ideas from Giran Zabi, and he wants to use a bioweapon on the entire colony, because, get this, it's outdated. I shit you not. Regardless, the specials are deployed, and then get their shit pushed in by Wu-fei. Well, at least until he runs out of energy, because the mobile suit isn't finished. It's at this point that Meirin hits the final Leo with a kamikaze attack in her mobile suit. It's at this point that Wu-fei honors her last wishes, because somehow she survived the explosion. The first is to no longer call his wife Meirin, but to finally call her Nataku. For a bit of background, Nataku is the Japanese translation of the Chinese deity Neza, a deity that protects children. As Wu-fei takes his wife to the flower field she wanted to be with him in, Wu-fei finally acknowledges exactly how strong of a woman his wife is. While she pays him a compliment in kind, she slips away and dies with her head on his shoulder. In her memory, Wu Fei names his mobile suit Nataku and swears to bring the justice that his wife held in such high regard to the Earth Alliance. Sally Poe reports back to the Alliance that everyone in the colony is dead, lying to save the lives of its inhabitants. The now Colonel, Treize Kushrenada, and his subordinate Lady Un see through the story, but they have no reason to tell the Alliance. Treize is aware of the mobile suit that was being built there, and he wishes to face those who would ride those mobile suits into combat. After Colony 195, Operation Meteor is about to begin, but the original plan for it is abandoned largely due to the consciences of the 5 doctors who designed the mobile suits meant to head to the Earth. The original plan was to drop a colony onto Earth, specifically A-0206, and the mobile suits would be led by Troa Barton, the son of Dakim Barton, to conquer it. Then, Dakim's granddaughter would rule the world. Thing is, Dakim and his son didn't realize that people have, morals, and his son is killed. It's at this point that No Name is given Troa's name, and the mission is changed by the 5 doctors. The 5 mobile suits will descend to Earth disguised as shooting stars, and will wage a guerrilla war against the Earth Sphere Alliance. Odenlo Jr. at this point is given a new name, a code name of Hiro Yui. The reason is simple. He is to represent the will of space, in a sense, and the idea that you can't just subject an entire set of colonies to tyrannical rule and expect them to lay down and let it happen, especially after you assassinated their leader. These 5 mobile suits, by the way, are known as Gundams. I know you guys have been waiting for a breakdown the instant we saw Shenlong earlier, so let's get to these monsters. Each of these 5 Gundams are called such because they've been built from an alloy called Gundanium. Now, Gundanium alloy might be the toughest alloy in all of Gundam fiction. The hits you're gonna see these suits take and keep moving are batshit insane. It's a material that can only be mined and refined in space through use of the most advanced refining, fusing, and dioxidizing techniques. Essentially, it uses high-temperature plasma to make the alloy, which you can't do on Earth. Now, what Gundanium does is twofold. Each of these mobile suits, due to the durability of the armor, can already tank hits that are just bonkers. But the big features that each of these mobile suits essentially have is, first, an anti-beam coating. So imagine 5 mobile suits with similar, if not better, beam resistance than the Hyaku Shiki from Zeta Gundam. On top of that, the material plays havoc with radar, making each of these suits ideal for their task of guerrilla warfare. Now, let's break each unit down. First, we have Unit 5, Wu Fei Chang's Shenlong Gundam. The XXG-01S Shenlong Gundam is an agile, close combat unit with a couple of medium-range options. On the head unit, it has 2 Vulcan guns that I'm going to assume are 60mm. On its left arm, you can see the Dragon Fang, a claw weapon that actually has the left arm extend outwards like a snake biting you. Inside of that weapon is a giant flamethrower as well, capable of melting mobile suits. It also carries a shield for defense, and its trademark weapon is a beam glaive. Now, the difference between the Endless Waltz version and the TV version is that the Endless Waltz one doesn't have the extending arm, though the dragon's head is still present and fully capable of crushing and slicing through mobile suits. Other than that, it's got an almost identical loadout, but also has an optional weapon called the Laoya unit. This massive physical blade could be attached to the Shenlong shield, and could even be thrown and retrieved via the cable that's attached to it. After that, we have Unit 4, the XXG-01SR Sandrock. This is another mobile suit that's close combat focused, but it's actually got a bit tougher armor than its fellow Gundams. Sandrock here is a desert combat Gundam and commander unit, possessing advanced communication and information analysis systems to help analyze the flow of battle and take command effectively. Like the other Gundams, it has 2 Vulcans in the head, but its main weapon is a pair of heat shuttles. These nasty physical blades could be superheated for extra cutting power and could dice a mobile suit in half with ease. On top of that, these were light enough that Catra could easily use them as throwing weapons. The Sandrock also has a shield that could mount both shuttles inside of it and create another weapon called the Cross Crusher. It also had 2 hidden missiles in the neck area. Now, the Endless Waltz version had a little bit more armament. Its shuttles were considerably larger, but still had the same functionality. But the MS could also use a beam machine gun, though I guess given the fact it's like an Uzi, it's more of a beam submachine gun. It also had the optional equipment of the Armadillo unit, which was a detachable armor with auxiliary boosters, and can even be fitted with extra armor and missile pods. Sandra could also be equipped with shoulder cannons and a beam rifle if the need arose. Next we have Unit 3, the XXXG-01H Gundam Heavy Arms. This one's kind of self-explanatory, but screw it, I like this thing. Heavy Arms' primary armament is DACA. DACA, DACA, DACA. It has DACA in the head with the Vulcans, plus DACA on the clavicle with machine cannons. It has DACA in the chest with 2 Gatling guns, then a bunch of DACA on its arm with a beam Gatling. Now there's debate on whether or not this is actually a beam weapon, because it does seem to run out of ammo and make a clicking noise when it's using physical rounds, so it's something to be considered. On top of all that, the mobile suit carried 6 homing missiles, 3 in each shoulder, and 2 pods of micro missiles on the legs, which carried 12 missiles each. It also carries an extendable knife on its left arm, also sharp enough to carve a mobile suit in 2, and resembles a machete. It's also red, and since red means FASTA, you can tell this one is Orc approved. Now the DACA improves with the Endless Waltz version. 2 Gatlings in the chest? How about 4? Homing missiles? Let's put them in the front skirt and leg armor, and then give this thing 44 of the damn things. Then let's put 44 micro missiles in the shoulders, alongside 8 more in the side skirt. So yeah, 96 missiles, plus all the lead that this thing spits. Also, let's turn the knife into the Marine Corps' K-bar. Oh, that's not enough for you? Fine, have an Eagle unit. Bam! This thing is such a beast that it puts leg-mounted crawler units on the heavy arms so it can move on the battlefield like a scope dog from Armored Trooper Bottoms. This son of a gun has 12 container blocks with 4 missiles in each block that face every direction, plus leg missile pods that attach to the already existing missile pods, which adds another 20 missiles each. So with this Eagle unit, you've got a mobile suit that supports all that DACA, plus a payload of nearly 200 missiles, 184 to be exact. Oh, and the unit can also be equipped with something called a Damselfly unit, which allows for atmospheric flight. Yeah, as if this thing wasn't scary enough already, then they gave it a helicopter pack. Next we have the third close combat unit of the bunch, but this one is probably everyone's favorite. Unit 2, also known as the XXXG-01D Gundam Death Scythe, takes the already stealthy materials of these Gundams and cranks it up with a pair of hyperjammers mounted on the backpack that take a hard-to-detect mobile suit and make it invisible to most electronics. It's also the fastest of the 5 Gundams, making for an effective stealth unit that specializes in hit-and-run tactics. The armament of this bad boy is pretty simple. It had Vulcans in the head, Natch, supposedly had shell cannons on its shoulders, but I don't remember them ever being used. Its shield could be used for defensive reasons, but could also emit a beam of its own and be launched at an enemy like a projectile. However, its namesake was the beam side that it used. The massive beam weapon could basically cut through anything and was so goddamn hot that it didn't get any hitches in trying to operate underwater. As for its Endless Waltz version, the kit is basically the same, though one thing I hate about the Endless Waltz paint job on the normal Death Scythe is that the coloring for the head is white. Doesn't look good in my opinion. I always thought the black and white head of the Death Scythe made it look like a Grim Reaper's hood. This Death Scythe version, the Endless Waltz version, has its Rosette unit. These wing units give the Death Scythe a bit of a mobility boost, allowing for atmospheric flight and making it look like a literal Angel of Death. Last but not least, we have our powerhouse unit. Unit 1, the XXXG-01W Wing Gundam. This unit is the only one that has a transformable flight unit, giving it more mobility options than its counterparts. The thing is, this is actually capable of hypersonic flight, and its wing units give it a lot more control capability in just about any sort of situation, whether it be in space or on Earth. It's also got a decent amount of armament as well. It has not just Vulcans in the head unit, but also machine cannons on the clavicle area, like heavy arms. And it also had a pretty massive shield, which of course can be used for defense, but also used offensively as a ramming weapon. Inside the shield, there's a hidden beam saber as well. And then we have the Buster Rifle. This mean thing has a lot of power in one weapon. As you can see on the gun, it carries 3 special cartridges that allow for 3 shots. This rifle, when fired, shoots out a massive beam that has an output that's compared to the daily energy usage of a medium-sized city. Firing this thing creates a 150-meter plasma vortex around the beam. Now, what does that mean? Everything that the beam hits, and some things that the beam comes close to, are absolutely destroyed. The beam pack system it uses also means that other mobile suits could use the weapon if needed, and it can be reloaded in the field. As for the Endless Waltz version, I honestly don't want to talk about it. I don't like the Endless Waltz version's design. You're seeing it in front of you, and its functionality is basically identical to the original. There it is, you see it, la-di-da. Before I break down the first arc of the series, let's talk a little bit about OZ. The name stands for Order of the Zodiac, and is also known as the Special Mobile Suit Unit, or just SMS, or the Specials. OZ is, for better or worse, going to be the primary target of Operation Meteor on Earth. Now, OZ serves two purposes. Obviously, it works as a Special Forces wing of the Alliance military. On top of that, it's also serving as a military wing of the Rockefeller Foundation. To put Rockefeller simply, it's an aristocratic society that has its roots in Europe, but branched out throughout the world over hundreds upon hundreds of years. Think of them as a society of aristocratic tyrants, and you're spot on. So how does this work? Sounds kind of like a complicated military, right? Well, here's a handy chart. Up here at the top, we have Rockefeller, who many of its members have leadership positions within OZ and the Earth Alliance, though at the start of the show they don't have complete control of the Alliance just yet. The Alliance is still independent of them. OZ serves two purposes, being part of the Alliance military, but ultimately following the whims of the Rockefeller Foundation. Though the Alliance military isn't sure why OZ is given as much free reign as they are, and you can see the normal Alliance military being resentful of that, the real reason is that Rockefeller is the real power here. So essentially, Rockefeller has a ton of influence over the Alliance, but not complete control at the moment, has complete control of OZ, and OZ works as part of the Alliance, but has a level of autonomy. So, is there an easy parallel to OZ in all of Gundam? Well, the closest you're going to come to in their relationship between the Earth military and its special forces is going to be the Earth Federation Space Forces and the Titans in Zeta Gundam, in the sense that both the Titans and OZ are capable of having autonomy outside of the main military that they're a part of. Technologically speaking, there's a lot of similarities between the mobile suits that they use as well. The main difference is leadership. And capes. Most OZ officers wear dope-ass capes. Seriously, OZ uniforms are a lot cooler than the Titans. Anyway, as for leadership, if you want someone like a Jamitov Hyman or Bask Oman in the Earth Alliance, as we already saw, you just look at General Septim. You've got it there. OZ's leadership is a bit different in its approach, because it's led by Colonel Treize Kushrenada. Now, we've mentioned Treize a little bit, but who really is this guy? Well, Treize, I believe, is best described by the title of his theme song in Gundam Wing. The Man Who Makes History. Treize is actually the great-nephew of Hiroyui, the politician. Also, shockingly given his rank within the Alliance military, he's only 24 years old at the time of the story. Treize is one of the most gifted soldiers on the Earth, if not the most gifted. He's a master tactician, a seasoned warrior, and on top of all that is an old-fashioned aristocrat. He believes in settling matters, for the most part, face-to-face with another soldier, and that one's willingness to fight for what they believe in isn't just a good thing, but rather should be a necessity for life. He's honorable, chivalrous, but he's also a tyrant. If there's any way to describe Treize, I'd put it like this. He believes you must be courteous, chivalrous, and willing to fight and die for your beliefs. He believes that might makes right, and that because of mankind's chaotic nature, the mighty of the world have to retain control of that chaos. Just listen to his speech on rule and control.
One might think that Oz's military power rooted in its mobile suit forces may result in excess rule. The word rule is commonly associated with oppression and arrogant actions. I look at it as a way of governing to keep people's unnecessary ambitions under control. God let people run free. People need to be ruled, and that can only be done if there's a system of rule and control that surpasses that of God's, since God lets them do what they want. I'm sure God would understand the steps we're taking.
Treize pulls a lot of influence from men like Sun Tzu and Friedrich Nietzsche in regards to his beliefs as a character. He believes that war and combat have a purpose and can be a noble and honorable thing, but he abhors things like dirty tactics like hostage-taking and things of that nature. Though admittedly, he does order assassinations of politicians at one point, but I don't think he sees politicians as warriors, to be honest with you, so probably sees them as a lot more disposable than an actual soldier. At least that's my thought. Either that or he tries to justify assassinations with the idea that it is necessary to retain control. Either one could be true. Or both ideas might not be mutually exclusive from one another in his mind. Now, you'll see in the show that he's clearly got a low opinion of someone like General Septim later on, mostly due to Septim's scheming, plus a fight getting interrupted by a hostage situation by one of his own in the story is something that he finds abhorrent. This is a man who very much is not against waging war against an entire people to bring them under his rule, because he believes he's right. On the other hand, if he beats you in combat, he will endeavor to remember and honor your memory, and will always respect your bravery if you're willing to fight him. Like his great uncle, he does believe in the pursuit of peace. The difference is that Treize's definition of peace is peace through subjugation. He's a very complicated villain, and my personal favorite in Gundam. It's quite a change from someone like Giran Zabi, who can best be described as, well...
Heil Hitler!
Well, actually the name's
Zabby.
Treize's most trusted subordinates within Oz are Lieutenant Zex Marquise, who, as I mentioned, is Milliardo Peacecraft, Special Colonel 2nd Class Lady Un, and yes, Lady is her name, not a rank, and Lieutenant 1st Class Lucrezia Noin. Lady Un serves as the assistant to Treize, whereas Zex prefers to stay on the front lines with his men. Lieutenant Noin is, at the start of the story, training recruits for the specials at the Lake Victoria Academy in South Africa. As we'll see throughout the story, all three are capable leaders in their own way, and ultimately will provide quite the test for our young Gundam pilots to defeat. Either way, the Gundams descend to Earth, with one of them being very briefly seen by Vice Foreign Minister Dorlin and his daughter Relina. Wing Gundam, piloted by Hiro Yui, also gets spotted by Zex Marquise and his men in the atmosphere. Now, like we saw with Treize and Lady Un, the Alliance got wind of Operation Meteor, so the Alliance knows these guys are coming. Wing Gundam sheds its coating, the badass music starts, and it changes course. Now, given that it's using its bird mode, Zex assumes that it's a fighter and orders Hiro shot down. Hiro gets orders from the doctors now running Operation Meteor to change course and eliminate the Oz carrier, given that it has a mobile suit payload. After a mid-air maneuver that would make Tom Cruise blush, the battle begins. Shockingly, Zex deploys any Leo with no flight equipment. So yeah, he plans to fight in freefall. He even lands a shot on the fighter with a Dober gun, which forces Hiro to change into Gundam mode. It's then that we see the Buster Rifle in action. With one shot, it annihilates two Ares mobile suits like they're an afterthought. Heck, before that, it's even wading through machine gun fire and missiles like nothing. While he's having fun, Zex is actually impressed too, and believe it or not, actually manages to neutralize the Gundam with mobile suit jujitsu, basically. Obviously, a Leo isn't going to be able to stop it, so he ditches the Leo after Hiro grapples with it and it hits the water. So we're going to do a better job of the rival battles in this one. So between Hiro and Zex for their first meeting, I've got to give this one to Zex. Hiro got a bit cocky and ended up heading to Davy Jones's locker. Hopefully old Squidface doesn't give him the whole, "Do you fear death?" Because Hiro's answer is a bit explosive. After this, Hiro gets found on the beach by Relina, and in shock that someone's seen his face, he tries to kill himself by detonating the suicide pack in his normal suit. Thing is, it doesn't kill him. In fact, in the manga of Episode 0, we find out that Dr. J, his handler, rigged it so it wouldn't kill him. So when an ambulance arrives, Hiro decides it's worth the 2-star wanted level and steals it to escape. As for the rest of the Gundams, the assault has begun. Deathside stealthily destroys a mobile suit hangar full of Leos. Trowa takes heavy arms and walks into gunfire like it's nothing, and proceeds to Daka everyone into dust at a spaceport. In the desert, Sandrock and Amagwanaut Corps start kicking the shit out of Oz forces that wandered into the territory, hunting Catra after he landed. He does give them a chance to surrender, they don't take it, and then Catra shows them how King Solomon handled disputes over children. Out in the waters, Oz battleships begin sinking after being lit on fire, as Wu Fei and Nataku work their magic. Intel on these attacks is given to Zex, and he remarks that all of these attacks have two things in common. First is the presence of Gundams, and the second is that there were 0 survivors. Back with Relina, back at school, she's handing out invitations to her birthday party. Oh, holy crap, Hiro is at her school too. He's a new student. Wasn't that nice? And she's gonna invite him to her birthday party. I wonder what Hiro's gonna...
But why? kill you.
Oh. Hey, Hiro, I'm gonna need you to go to a doctor because how the fuck does someone literally have ice water in their veins? Dear God, man. From here, Hiro realizes he has to destroy his Gundam to prevent Oz from getting their hands on it. So after some school drama and he shows off his swordsman skills, he manages to get some torpedoes rigged to blow the thing. Oz sends out its underwater units to grab Wing Gundam. So these machines are known as Pisces and Cancer. The Pisces is a pretty simple underwater machine, specifically built solely for fighting enemy submersibles. It carries a payload of torpedoes, but also depth charges on top of that. The Cancer, on the other hand, is built for both aquatic combat and aquatic-to-land assaults. Instead of the Pisces' depth charges, it has anti-ground missiles that can be used to pound ground defenses to support other mobile units, or clear the way for ground units to land and push inland. It also has a sort of short-range cannon in its claws. Hey Duo, what do you think of these units? Fuck you! The Alliance forces panic after losing so many mobile suits to the Gundam, and launch torpedoes everywhere, some that even come close to sinking Zex's vessel. Duo and the Death Scythe don't take too kindly to that, and Duo does something that was crappily duplicated by the Wish version of Death Scythe and Seed by carving up a naval vessel with style. See, Death Scythe equals style. Forbidden Gundam equals lame Wish imitator. The one on the left is Slayer, the one on the right is Limp Bizkit. I'm never stopping, by the way, Seed sucks. Elsewhere, Troll Barton shows that he's as fearless as it gets by petting a lion like a fucking house cat as basically a job application at a circus. Good way to stay undercover, I suppose, but I'm pretty convinced that Troa here is the reincarnated version of Chirico from Bottoms. Well, that's assuming that somebody could actually kill Chirico in the first place, which nobody's been able to yet. Now, Catra, on the other hand, is sightseeing as a bunch of flamingos are probably shitting on Sandrock. As for Wu Fei, he's buying a bunch of bombs. Elsewhere, Relina, I shit you not, leaves her own birthday party to chase after Hiro. Jeez, this chick's got one hell of a crush. Let's check in on the Oz pilots. They seem to have found Wing Gundam. As they try to retrieve it, its self-destruct goes off, starting to count down to boom. Suddenly, the Grim Reaper has arrived. He takes out two Pisces like an afterthought, and then when the Cancer from Zex's crew grabs him, it eats more shots to the face than 50 Cent after he dropped the song Ghetto Quran. Oh yeah, that didn't do shit. Eat Buster Shield. Duo manages to stop the self-detonate device and bring Wing Gundam up to surface as a way to have spare parts for his mobile suit. Hiro, on the other hand, has started blowing up the dock and murdering the Alliance soldiers so he can prepare to destroy his MS. Relina catches up to him. From here, we see the one time the hero is actually prepared to kill Relina, at least in the early story. Duo shoots him in the arm, stopping him. Now, I might be asking, why is it that two Gundam pilots are fighting? Well, in this case, these two have no clue who the other is because communication between colonies has been banned for years. Changes to Operation Meteor happened at the 0 hour, so intel on who they were all supposed to be working with just hadn't reached them. Not to mention, how is Duo supposed to know the hero's a Gundam pilot? It's not like it's on the green shirt he always wears or something. Anyway, to Duo's surprise, Relina gets the two to stop the conflict when she bandages Hiro's arm. Then Hiro sends torpedoes at the Gundams to try and destroy them, but ultimately the payload isn't enough. It just sends them down into the ocean. Also, someone might want to grab Hiro. He's a tough guy, but I don't think he has gills. Elsewhere, Zex and Treize discuss further steps, with their main idea being reinforcing the bases in the Mediterranean. Treize, being Treize, realizes that Zex wants to be wherever those Gundams are because Zex says he is a true soldier. To give a hint to the guy's psychology, he loves a good fight, and as of right now, those pilots are the only people that, up to this point, haven't been steamrolled by Alliance forces. Anyway, Treize shoots a bird hiding behind the target range, encouraging Zex to shoot him down for him. Back with Hiro, he's been captured in his Alliance medical center in the Jesus Christ pose. Apparently the Alliance isn't big on patching up the enemy, because he's still bleeding from his gunshot wound. Overlooking his status is Major Sally Poe of the Alliance military. We saw Sally before this during Episode 0, and now she's on Earth overseeing this medical facility in the Japan region. There's a couple of elements of note here. First is that she says that Hiro has over 200 bruises and broken bones. We're putting that text there in front of you because there's a comma you guys need to see because Hiro doesn't likely have 200 broken bones. That would mean that only 6 bones in his entire body wouldn't be busted, and you'd likely die at that point from a punctured organ. The big thing is that looking at him, you just think that he's got a gunshot wound. The other thing of note is that Hiro had a disk on him that the Alliance's best computers couldn't decode, that he mentions as he's laying on the bed, plus more that he already knows. I'm assuming that this is the type of disk that gets sent to him, or that he uses to put into the Gundam to feed intel into it on where his targets are, and just the encryption is too good for the Alliance to crack. Elsewhere, Wu Fei is still on the warpath taking out a supply base. The thing is, Zex already figured that he was going to do that, and they prepared to face him at a different location. Back at the hospital, Hiro is trying to bust out, but he's got an ally he probably didn't expect. Duo shows up on his monitor, letting him know that he's there to help. He also learned more super spy stuff, and the idea that Hiro is able to have enough control over his heart rate and brainwaves, so he's not going to show up on instruments when it comes to whether he's conscious or unconscious. Essentially, these kids just might as well be called super soldiers. Let's just roll with that. Elsewhere, Sally Poe's been talking to Relina about Hiro, and Sally can kind of see through her bullshit. It's obvious that she's being a bit of a brat who just wants to see the kid she's got a crush on. But as for Sally, she thinks Relina might be able to give them some info on him. So she just lets her talk. Then Duo does Duo things and breaks Hiro out. They bust out of a window, and Duo uses a sort of beam propeller to slow his descent like something from Victory Gundam. As for Hiro, he tries to kill himself again, at least until he hears Relina. Then he pulls his chute, stumbles down a cliff, and then through sand, and then just stands up as badass music from Ko Otani plays. Either way, the Gundam pilots leave. At the Corsica base, the Alliance military have bolstered their forces to defend the Leo plant. As for Zex, he sees something hidden at the Corsica base. Specifically, the original mobile suit, and the only thing Oz has that can compare to a Gundam. Ladies and gents, meet one of my favorite mobile suits ever, the Tall Geese. Now, we're not going to break it down here because it's actually not assembled yet. But the main thing they mentioned is that this thing, compared to other mobile suits, is a big boy. Anyway, the base commander of Corsica seems to think that there's nothing to really worry about and there's no attack coming. Hey, Troa, do you have a retort to that?
Frog blast the vent core! Ah!
The Oz pilots counterattack with Ares suits immediately, but Troa is already making mincemeat out of everything in his path. Though Commander Bonaparte's got smart tactics and how to take out a single mobile suit, this is a Gundam we're talking about. You have to factor in how fucking tough and well-armed these suits are. Troa immediately starts with a long division using his combat knife, but he's out of ammo at this point. Though one Oz member tries to charge him, it's not a smart idea in the long run, because Troa has some unexpected backup. The Magwanaut Corps is here, and Sandrock takes out the final Oz member. Though there's some initial confusion between Catra and Troa in regards to whether or not Catra's hostile to him, they pretty quickly talk things out. Now, things get a bit fearsome. Elsewhere, we see the retrieval of Death Scythe and Wing Gundam. 5 Gundams, and 4 of them are paired off into teams now. Oh, and Hiro just puts a busted leg back into place like he just took first aid tips from John Rambo or something. After this, we get some chatter between Zex and Lieutenant Noin. He remarks that even though she's been a member of Oz for years, she's not really a fan of war, and is now training soldiers at the same base that those two, Noin and Zex, were trained at. She says that it's for her love of outer space, but we won't hear that expanded on for a while. What we do find out is that the two have been close for years, with Noin really always wanting to be Zex's second. The reason's obvious. She's in love with the guy. She's also aware that he's Milliardo Peacecraft, so it's kind of obvious that the two are very close. Zex wouldn't trust that info with just about anyone. Also, big credit to Chisa Yokohama and Saffron Henderson for their voice work with this character. Of these early episodes, episode 4 is one of my favorites because of how well Noin's role is played here, plus her reactions to another situation later. Now, one thing you'll notice is that this whole previous episode was pointing at the idea of Wu Fei heading for Corsica, but instead we got Sandrock and Heavy Arms. Instead, Wu Fei's headed straight for Lieutenant Noin at Lake Victoria by Zex's estimation, considering A, it's a training facility for Oz, and B, they get a bunch of new mobile suits that they're preparing to send to space. These suits are called the Taurus. The OZ-12 SMS Taurus is specifically engineered for Oz use, meant to replace the Leo as the main suit for that unit. It's a much stronger and faster suit with a lot more power and mobility. That's mostly due to the fact that the suit has a mobile armor function, allowing it to fly in the atmosphere similar to how Wing Gundam is able to in this universe. Or in the Universal Century, it's similar to the Wave Rider modes of suits like the Zeta Gundam, the Rig Z, or the Riesel. It has a pretty simple kit, primarily using a cartridge-loaded beam rifle and a beam saber for close combat. However, it could also use a much more powerful beam cannon that required both hands for proper use. Given the mobility and output, these suits were quite the upgrade from the Leo. Anyway, Zex and Noin have a discussion that evening about preparations for possible Gundam attacks. One thing that Noin remarks is that she doesn't believe that her men are going to end up dead in battle, but Zex has seen what these Gundams can do. He knows the reality of it. That reality, to Noin's detriment, comes later that evening because her opponents fight dirty as hell and prove her right that, well, they don't get killed in battle. Now, as we watch the Oz soldiers scramble after the attack, one thing I need to mention is that though this is a brutal tactic by Wu Fei, it's also an example of why I mentioned that the Gundam pilots are engaging in guerrilla warfare. A big part of that is sabotage and sneak attacks, and that's exactly what Wu Fei is doing. Oh, you just had a bunch of graduates that are about to hit the battlefield? Yeah, no, that's not happening. As dirty as this is, it is strategically very smart. If your enemy has more numbers than you do, cut off the ability for them to reinforce those numbers and get them supplies. Prior to this, he attacked a supply base. Now he goes for the troopers. Is Wu Fei a dick? Yeah. Is this kind of a dirty tactic? Yeah. But as much as you might find this deplorable, this is war. In war, recruits are just as fair game as anyone else. It just shows you that war is brutal and something to be avoided. Another smart thing that Wu Fei did is he didn't bring his suit yet. He did this on foot, basically pulling some solid Snake shit. He tries to escape via motorcycle, but Noin gives chase in her Ares. Her men are ordered to grab a space laser, which is essentially the cannon that the Taurus suits use that I mentioned earlier. Noin opens up on the motorcycle and knocks Wu Fei over, but won't finish him off since she notices his youth. Wu Fei uses this to his advantage, and uses a flashbang that can apparently be set off with a kick, then flees to his Gundam. Style over design practicality, I guess. Anyway, it's here that Noin makes a key mistake. Right as they're about to unload on Wu Fei, she instructs her men not to. And now the meme is in context. Hey Wu Fei, why did she give that order?
'Cause she's a woman.
Wu Fei drops her men easily, and then knocks Noin out of the air like he's playing Duck Hunt. Wu Fei then takes the space laser and blasts the Taurus suits out of the sky. And he lays out exactly his disdain for Noin's inability to pull the trigger.
You saw I was a kid and you underestimated me. You're a weak soldier. I don't kill bleeding hearts or women.
Now, to be honest, I do think we need to acknowledge something about Wu Fei here, is that another reason he probably doesn't kill Noin is because of what happened to his wife. He'd never admit it, because Wu Fei's stubbornness isn't like a mule. More like the factor of stubbornness that a mule has, and then cube it. Duo and Hiro are discussing Hiro being Hiro, and Hiro gets intel that there's a Gundanium shipment going to Oz that Hiro is going to intercept in the morning. Now, Duo knows that Hiro doesn't have the parts. Later that morning, he goes and intercepts it. See, Hiro agreed that he doesn't have the parts, so he borrows some from Duo, much to his chagrin. Now, why is Oz shipping in Gundanium? Well, sadly, I'm not going to talk about it here, because we don't really find out why until much later. I can confirm, though, it's not for the Tall Geese, because that suit doesn't use Gundanium, oddly enough. Elsewhere, Relina's father gets into an argument with the heads of the Alliance military over the colony's involvement in all this. And Dorland's got it right when he says that the Alliance brought this on themselves, but they've got no proof that the colony governments wanted this. On top of that, Treize gives orders to have the Vice Foreign Minister taken care of. As for Noin, she tells Zex that she wants to join him in the field. Also, Wu Fei's pissed off and tells off some hyenas. After that, Relina and her dad head to space to speak with the colonial government officials under the guise of finding out the truth of who is behind the Gundam attacks. Lady Un leaves her makeup case behind, but Relina so nicely brings it back to her. Then she chucks the fucker like a grenade and blows up the colony officials and Relina's dad. Relina, of course, runs to her father, and Un orders her capture and execution if she resists. Luckily for Relina, colonial rebels manage to evac her to safety. It's here that she's told the truth of her birth, that she's the other child of King Peacecraft. She's also introduced to Hiro's handler, Dr. J, master craftsman of mobile suits and has a killer hookshot in basketball. He has an interesting discussion with Relina, giving more of Hiro's background, basically that he's an assassin trained by the rebels of the colonies to do what he's been doing, wage war on the Earth's military in retaliation for the Earth's tyrannical subjugation of the space colonies. Now, Relina does ask if there's a peaceful solution to all this, but Dr. J tells her about Hiro's namesake, and that when the colonies tried peace, their leader got assassinated. When he drops off Relina so she can head back to the Earth, he tells her that Hiro deep down is not a bad guy. He's actually a kind soul, but at the same time she should keep her distance, because she could end up getting killed. At this point, the Gundam pilots have separate missions that they're sent on. Hiro's back at school, Duo's out on the sea with Howard, who repairs his mobile suit, and has a bit more time to talk with him, and Howard's got a bit more to him that I'll talk about another time. And Troa's headed out from the Magwanac base. Wu Fei and Hiro also begin to execute missions. With the Oz forces, the Tall Geese's construction is coming along nicely, with Zex telling Noin that this thing is basically the father of all mobile suits, including the Gundams. During Hiro's mission, he meets up with Duo again, and actually saves his hide after Duo thinks that Hiro is trying to shoot him. It's a funny little sequence. Anyway, Relina gets home safely, and the news about her parentage is hitting her kind of hard. Shockingly, Treize at this point orders mobile suits to be sent to eliminate the rest of the Dorland family. Well, how's that work out for him? After saving Relina, Hiro considers killing her himself, considering she knows who he is, but he can't bring himself to do it, and he doesn't understand why. Treize orders Lady Une to return, and at this point we find out that he stops, because Zex asked him to be a Lieutenant Noin. Though he's well aware that Zex is Milliardo Peacecraft, he wasn't aware that his sister was still alive. It's likely that, had he known that she was a Peacecraft, he would have never given the order in the first place. In other parts of the world, Wu Fei is continuing his attacks with Oz bases. Duo is hanging out with Howard, and Tro is hanging out and doing knife tricks at the circus. The one thing notable about this is his relationship with Catherine. Kind of a big sister, little brother thing between these two, and it makes sense as to why. You know the little girl we saw when Tro was literally bouncing out of a horse-drawn carriage? That was Catherine. Yeah, though they'll never find out these two are actually biological siblings. So if you shipped them, you're a sick fuck. Later on at the New Edwards Alliance base, there's a large meeting with all the bigwigs of both the Alliance and Oz in one spot. Well, except Zex and Noin, who are in Nairobi at the time. At this point, every Gundam pilot receives orders to head to New Edwards base in California. Troa and Catra end up shipping out on the same ship, and Duo and Hiro end up sneaking into the same base to load up Wing Gundam and Death Scythe. Now, the Gundam pilots don't know that this is a meeting of all the Alliance heads, as opposed to simply Oz. Now, at this meeting, there's a bit of a disagreement between Grand Marshal Noventa and General Septim. Noventa, who is the head of all Alliance forces, is not a fan of how militaristic the Alliance has become, along with General Vente, who is the head of the Earth's ground forces. Now, General Septim, of course, isn't happy that they hold this feeling, because as we know, he's the reason that this whole thing is happening, since he ordered the assassination of Hiroyui on top of trying to gas a colony. Regardless, Noventa and Vente know the direction the Alliance is going isn't gonna help anything. So, they want to start negotiations to calm the situation down to end the violence. Now, Treize obviously isn't a fan of this. It doesn't fit his worldview or how the Rockefeller Foundation wants things to go. Then, the Gundams attack, and Treize uses this as his prime moment to change the world government in the way that Rockefeller would want it. Wing Gundam and Death Scythe are the first to hit the ground, and note that the defense line is 10 times what they were expecting. Noventa wants to open communication lines to try and talk the pilots down, but Treize encourages Noventa and his men to use his shuttle to escape. However, Treize has General Septim join him on his personal shuttle along with the Oz commanders. It's here that Treize authorizes Operation Daybreak. Noin and Zex and dozens of Oz pilots descend and begin to attack. Across the world, Oz forces start systematically annihilating the commanders of the Alliance, both with deployed forces and with members of the organization that they slipped in with the regular forces. At this point, Zex encourages the Alliance forces to surrender and join Oz. The coup d'etat is a success, all done in one fell swoop. The final blow hasn't landed just yet. Back at New Edwards, Heavy Arms and Sandrock have arrived on the scene, but Troa almost becomes a team-killing fucktard and hits Duo and Hiro with splash damage from his missiles. As you can imagine, Hiro and Duo are fucking confused. Noventa's shuttle launches with a big ol' Oz logo on it. At that point, Hiro notices it, takes off, and with one saber blow, kills Noventa and all the people that would seek peace with the very colonies that Hiro is fighting for. As Duo and Troa get into it with each other, and Catra tells him to knock it off, Wu Fei finally shows up a bit late to the party and talks some sense. He reveals exactly what Hiro just did. That the very pilots who were meant to fight for the colonies just butchered the best hope for peace. General Septim calls this a declaration of war from the colonies and solidifies that peace isn't going to happen. At this point, Lady Une drops Septim out of the shuttle and shoots him in the face, killing him. So, thank you, Lady Une, I guess? Regardless, Treize states that the second act has just begun. Without even getting into a mobile suit, and without firing a bullet himself, Treize not only took out the only opposition to Rockefeller's world domination, but he used his biggest enemies in the Gundams to do it. At this point, Hiro laments his foolishness, and Wu Fei plants his heels and declares that he's not going to stop fighting. From here, the future will only get darker. as now we realize that the Gundam's biggest foe in Treize Kushrenada just played them all for fools. Next time on Gundam Wing Explained. Things begin to heat up as the Gundam pilots continue their guerrilla war on the Earth, attempting to still wage war for the freedom of the colonies. However, not all may be as they expect, as the Tallgeese is finally unleashed with Zex Marquis at the helm, and the support of the people of the colonies may not always be a definite thing. Join us next time for Gundam Wing Explained Episode 2, The Fight for Independence.